We've got a few people joining. We're just at the top of the hour, so just as a reminder, you're joining via Zoom webinar, which means that you won't be on audio or on video, but you can participate via chat. And we are going to have a number of opportunities for you to join in. So if at the bottom of your screen, you open your chat window, you'll be able to do that really easily. Just as a reminder, the chat defaults to only interacting with the panelist, which is me in this case. If you can click on the little drop down there, you'll be able to choose panelists and everyone. And that way you can interact with everybody who's engaged in the chat. So it's a nice way for everybody to be able to see the conversation that's going on. We'll give people just another 30 seconds and then we'll get going. I see a couple of people coming through on chat. Thank you, Sean. And we're happy, Sean, to share that with you perhaps after the webinar. So reach out, just send us an email and we'll share with you how our setup works here in the studio. All right, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Julie Williamson. I'm the Chief Growth Enabler at Karrikins Group. And we're here today to talk about how to move from being stalled to success through the power of leadership alignment. One of the things that we often see with the leadership teams that we work with all around the world is that it's easy to get a little stalled out on some of your most important strategies and priorities because you haven't yet worked your way into full leadership alignment about the work that needs to be done in order to deliver on those strategies. I know that we've got some folks here from the Southern Hemisphere. Thank you so much for joining us. I know it's late your time, and I know we've got some folks in here from Europe as well. Thanks again. I know it's getting towards evening, and for those of you who are joining us from North America, we really appreciate you jumping in and being a part of the conversation. This is truly a global challenge, the challenge of being in alignment as a leadership team in order to deliver on your most important strategies. When we think about the power of alignment, what we're really talking about is how you move beyond the easy conversations where you're like, yes, we should do that, or that's a great idea, or I'll support you in that, and actually start to have the tough conversations as a leadership team about how do we move into alignment and action around those most important priorities. Now, we hear from people all around the globe, literally, about strategies where they've stalled out just a little bit. And just to get everybody into the chat, I would just love to hear if there are some things in your organization where you feel like everybody's in agreement, but we're kind of stalled out on actually bringing it to life. One of the things where we hear this a lot is around diversity, for example. People will say, we need more diversity around here. And there's a lot of agreement, but it's hard to move into alignment because it's not clear what the actions are that are required to do that. Another example I can give you from a client I was working with just a few weeks ago, they've been talking about the need to reshape their distribution model literally for years. Everybody's in agreement that they need to do that work, but they haven't yet taken on the hard work of aligning to it as a leadership team and figuring out how they move into that strategy and actually deliver on it. So let's take a look at the chat and see what people are popping in there. Yeah, Bruce, I can see that you've just, to all panelists, you've posted not stopping investments that aren't aligned with the strategy. Bruce, if you could just in your drop-down window, change that to panelists and everyone, the rest of the people on the webinar will be able to see your responses as well. But yeah, that's a big one. We hear people say, what we really need to do is we need to be able to stop doing some things in order to reallocate our investments and deliver on our strategies, but we never stop doing things around here. That's a really tough conversation to have. The idea that you have to lean into taking resources away from a group that's been really accustomed and comfortable with having them. Here's another one from Vandy, getting everyone on the same page and working together towards the same goal. Yeah, again, it's easy to agree. That's what we should do. That's what we like to do. That makes a lot of sense. But if you're stopping with agreement, then you're not moving into the hard work of aligning. There's an old expression, people say, to go fast, go alone. To go far, go together. And at Karrikins Group, we like to say to go far fast, get aligned. Alignment is such an important process for leadership teams to get good at and to be able to work through effectively, because it's what brings your strategies to life. Here's another one from Mary: committing to our company culture and being consistent. Yeah, so we hear this a lot too, right? Our company culture is whatever we've defined it to be, and yet in the organization, we continue to reward behaviors that are inconsistent with our culture. We see that a lot, by the way, in sales organizations. So if you're in a sales organization, it's something to think about. Are you rewarding behaviors that are supporting the culture that you say you want to have? Or are you just agreeing kind of in theory that that's the right culture, but in practice, the behaviors and the decisions that are being made are inconsistent and out of alignment with that? A very, very common space, Mary. Thanks for that one. Yeah, so these are some great examples of where it's easy to get stalled out on accomplishing what you're setting out to accomplish because you're staying in agreement and you're not pushing through to the power of leadership alignment. At Karrikins Group, we use our Diamond Triangle model to really help think through, are you being clear as a leadership team on why you're doing what you're doing? It's really important to know your mission, your values, your purpose, everything in that space. A lot of companies have done some great work in the last 10, 20 years about getting very clear on why they do what they do. What's their purpose? It's equally important to have strategic clarity. So we call this the what is your strategy. It's your priorities, your transformation plans. It can also be down in the area of tactics, but knowing what it is that you intend to do is really important, and having strategic clarity there is equally valuable. Unfortunately, that's where agreement often stalls out. People will agree to what needs to be done, but they haven't had the hard conversation in the how space to really understand how are we going to do that as a leadership team. And that's in part because those how conversations can be quite confronting. It can be the space where people find out that they're not going to be able to continue doing what they've always been doing, that change is on the horizon, that disruption is happening in the organization. So we really lean into this idea of don't just know your why and your what, but also know your how. Figure out how you're going to lead together, because that's where alignment happens. Alignment happens when you dig into the how we're going to accomplish something. And by how, I don't mean the tactics or the details in your strategy. I mean, how are you going to lead together to deliver on your most ambitious strategies and to have the most positive impact on your employees, on your customers, and on your investors? When we think about this space between agreement and alignment, it's really helpful to take a minute and think about what agreement really is. What do we mean when we talk about agreement? Agreement is when you just generally think something's a good idea. Like, yeah, that sounds good. I'm happy to support that. I'm okay with that. You're being supportive in the room. Often it preserves the status quo. It means that nothing actually has to change because we're just nominally agreeing to an idea that's quite high on the ladder of abstraction. And when we talk about that ladder of abstraction, it's what keeps agreement kind of unthreatening for the leadership team as a whole. When we think about the outcomes of agreement, unfortunately, one of the outcomes of agreement is circular conversations. Raise your hand in Zoom if you've ever felt like you've had the same conversation over and over and over again, that you're just like, okay, here we are. We had this conversation last week, last month, last year, and we keep agreeing to it, but nothing ever gets done, or it isn't going as fast or as far as we want it to go. Raise your hand if we've got that kind of situation. We've got a few hands coming up, which is not at all unexpected. Circular conversations are one of the major challenges that executive teams have when we work with them. And sometimes in our interviews, our one-on-one interviews with them, I'll ask the question, what's a conversation that you never want to have again? What's a conversation you never want to have again? And inevitably, it has to do with the strategy. So people will say, I never want to talk about having to reinvent our distribution model again. I want us to just do it. And that's where getting stuck in agreement is really dangerous, because you're not doing the work to get into alignment around how to deliver. And that's holding you back from being able to really accelerate against a particular strategy or priority or an initiative that's really important to the future of your organization. So agreement, while it feels good and while it's an important step, it's nice to get people into agreement. It's insufficient to really take ground on your strategy. You have to do the work to get aligned across the organization about how you're going to deliver on those most important strategies. So let's talk a little bit about what alignment is. Yeah, I see Vandy just put in their hamster on the wheel. Yeah, and oh, we need to transform into a digital first company. Yeah, Erica, I hear that one a lot. That's a conversation people say they never want to have again. We need digital transformation around here. And then people say, well, what does that even really mean? Like, it sounds good and we all agree to it, but how do we actually bring that to life as leaders? One of the tricks in today's business environment that is different from a more traditional business environment from 20 or 30 years ago is that organizations tend to be more interconnected. There's more dependencies, there's more matrix structures in organizations today. And that means you have to have horizontal alignment about how to do something like digital transformation. Everybody has to be moving forward together. It can't just be one vertical in the organization deciding to take these big steps. You've got to get aligned on how you're going to lead together. And that's where you get acceleration and you break out of being stalled by having this kind of false level of agreement. Let's talk a little bit about what alignment looks like. Alignment is when you're really creating this shared clarity around how we're going to work together, what we're going to do differently. It's having some really hard conversations. Alignment is not easy because it requires you to make visible the difficult things that have to get done in the organization. And when I say difficult things, I mean changing leadership behaviors, decision-making, trade-offs that they're used to making, deeply habituated mindsets and group dynamics and organizational factors that are keeping you stagnated in agreement around what needs to be done, but not in alignment on how you're going to do it together. The reason it's difficult is because it often means that people are going to be personally disrupted. If you really, for example, want to lean into digital transformation, one of the things about digital transformation is it requires new job and career paths in your organization. You might have an entire level of people in your company that are banking on a certain career path, and that career path might be going away if you truly transform your company. Leaders have a hard time really diving into the nitty-gritty about how do we have that kind of impact on our people, as well as on our customers and on our investors. It can be going to the investment community and saying, hey, we're going to start shifting away from this really reliable product that drives really reliable revenue because we need to move into a more innovative space. We need to start reaching for the future. Those are easy things to say and they're easy to agree with, but it's hard to have real clarity around how we're going to lead together to make that a reality, to bring that to life. So the reason that alignment can be very challenging is because it's coming down the ladder of abstraction. Agreement is very high on the ladder of abstraction. Alignment brings you down on the ladder of abstraction in terms of the behavior that is required from leaders, the decision-making, the trade-offs, the behaviors that they're exhibiting that are required in order to deliver on those strategies. And that step down on the ladder of abstraction can be really confronting for people. It means that you're stepping up and you're willing to be measured. You're willing to lean into that space and not be measured in terms of the revenue targets that you hit or the process metrics that you hit, but in terms of your leadership behaviors and how you're leading together. That's really the distinction between agreement and alignment in terms of how we lead. Let's just play around with it a little bit as a group. We've got a little setup here, and I think these are just some really simple statements. So I started with a personal one, more of a family dynamic, and then a more corporate focused one. These are all agreement statements that we hear all the time. Raise your hand if you heard or if you said, I should get in shape this year back in January. How many people got that one for a New Year's resolution? I'm sure you either heard it or you saw it, right? You heard it or you said it yourself, one of those two things. We've got quite a few hands going up. Yeah. So I think this is a really easy one. Let's think about if we were going to bring that down the ladder of abstraction, because it's easy to agree to. I should work out more often. Yeah. Most people, that's a pretty agreeable thing. Unless you're training for an Olympic event, you could probably afford to work out more often. So what would shift that, bring it down the ladder of abstraction, make it more measurable, something that you could actually be held accountable to, and make it more of an alignment statement, something that you can show alignment to? How might you bring that down? Let's pop that in the chat. So Bruce, that's a great one. I'm working with a trainer 3 times a week. I love that. My colleague Kate is going to be entering some of these in as we go through. So we'll pop that one up there. I'm working out with a trainer 3 times a week. Yeah, you can see the difference, right? So somebody can actually see and tell if you're working out with a trainer 3 times a week. Jandal, I love that. I should work out some minimal number of days a week. Yeah, something that brings you down the ladder of abstraction and makes it more specific. I'm waking an hour earlier each morning. Anne-Marie, I love that. So again, we're getting more specific, and it's, again, a little bit more confronting because you can actually be held accountable to that. Let's pivot and let's take it forward. Let's think about, oh, I love that I joined a nutrition boot camp. Those are some great ideas. And I see I have a weekly plan of what workouts to do each week. Yeah, exactly. These are all things that you know if you're doing it or not. Conceptually, whether you're working out more often or not is, like, again, agreeable, but you can't be held accountable to it. So it's too high on the ladder of abstraction to hold yourself in alignment to it. That's a great personal one. Let's take a look at, it would be great to have more family time. If we were bringing that down the ladder of abstraction and we were getting a little bit more specific about it, what might that sound like if we were coming into alignment with that idea? So the what, if you remember the diamond triangle, why? Because families are important. What? We need more family time. What's the how? How are we going to do that? How do we get more specific about that? Oh, Mary, I love that one. We're having more tech-free dinners. We're having tech-free dinners twice a week. Yep. Jandel, every Wednesday and Friday and Sunday, we'll have dinner together. Yeah, I love that. By the way, tech-free, let's put that one up there. We're having tech-free dinners twice a week. Good luck if you have teenagers, but I think it's really important to do, right? It's something that can be really specific. Movie night, Anne, I love that one. And I know, Anne, you love watching movies too. We're doing a fun family outing on Sundays. Yeah. So again, you'll know if you're doing these or not, right? Like the concept of it would be great to have more family time is hard to argue with. The idea that we are doing a fun family outing on Sundays, you're going to know if you're doing that or not. So it makes it more visible, it makes it more real, and it's very clear about what behavior needs to change. So I love also that you're leaning into this idea of behavior change. So it's not about 30% of the time. It's about, here's the behavior that we want to do differently. We want to have fun outings on Sundays. So I think that's great. You're right at the right level on that ladder of abstraction. All right, let's tackle one of my favorites. This has got to be in the top 5 of agreement statements that we hear from clients all around the world. We need to be more collaborative. And so just by a show of hands, how many people have either said or heard, we need to be more collaborative? I'll bet that there are a few hands that go up. Yeah. At least 12, 15. Oh, the number is going up. Yes. So we need to be more collaborative around here. We hear that all the time. And yet collaboration doesn't happen. So if you were a leader in an organization where there's massive agreement that we need to be more collaborative, how could you shift your language? How could you start to move into alignment space around being more collaborative? How could you put yourself out there and stop saying we need to be more collaborative and actually say, here's what I'm doing as a leader to create collaboration in my organization? By the way, Vandy, I just want to call out your designated mom son time. I think that's an awesome one as well. Daniel, I like this. I'm hosting cross-functional challenge sessions 4 times a week to align my energy to be more collaborative in my sessions. Yeah, I think, again, it's taking ownership, right? Change never happens until someone changes. So someone's got to do something differently. It's easy to say, we all say we want to be more collaborative around here, but no one does it. As a leader in your organization, how can you lean into that space for yourself and start to think about how do you show up as a more collaborative leader or as a more collaborative colleague in that space? So I'm going to add that one in there for Daniel. I'm hosting cross-functional challenge sessions. Thanks, Daniel. Jandel, I see you're putting in there, let's put these 3 specific departments together to get clarity on X so that we can move forward. Yeah, that's a great example of how, as a leader, you can start to change the behavior in an organization by really shifting the way that people are showing up in that space. Here's the thing. People will often say to me, well, Julie, it's just words. These are just words. Language doesn't matter. But it's actually the first step in changing behavior. And it's actually the first step in moving from focusing on what you want to do and shifting into how you want to do it. Because it's through language that as leaders, we tackle these incredibly difficult conversations about how we need to work differently in order to deliver on our most important strategies. If you only focus on the what, you're staying in a very safe space conversationally. You're not actually, as colleagues, grappling with the really difficult challenges of how do we need to change our behaviors, our decision-making, the trade-offs that we're making every day in order to deliver on a particularly challenging strategy. So it is the first step in getting into alignment, identifying agreement statements that are being bandied about the organization and starting to challenge yourself and others to move into the language of alignment, because people don't want to inherently say things that aren't true. If you're going to say, I'm hosting cross-functional challenge sessions, you are far more likely to host a cross-functional challenge session than if you're just saying, we need to be more collaborative around here. So moving into this level of specificity is really, really helpful. I've given you just a couple of fun ones to play around with here, but I'd love to pivot and think really for in your own organization, what's actually happening behind the scenes? Where are you hearing agreement statements that you would love to see move into alignment statements? What are some of the things that you're experiencing in your own organization that would just be, kind of where you just think to yourself, I never want to hear that again. I'll give you one. We should be more innovative around here. We hear that all the time. It's right up there in the top 5, maybe the top 3, along with we need to be more collaborative. We need to be more innovative. But we don't see alignment to it at a leadership level. I'm curious about what's happening in your organization that kind of falls in that category. What are some agreement statements that you're hearing all the time where you just feel like, I would love for us to stop saying that and actually do something about it? And let's see what we get in the chat. Yeah, we need to connect the dots, Vandy. We hear that one a lot. That kind of goes in the collaboration space, right? Like we need to have better clarity across the organization in order to work more effectively together. I see this one, we need to put the customer first. Yeah, oh my gosh. We need to focus on the customer. We need to put the customer first. We need the voice of the customer. We hear that a lot as well. And I think it's one of those ones that is very hard actually, because you have to change behaviors in order to make it happen. And you might have to push salespeople to work differently. You might have to push your delivery people to work differently. But it really is something that requires transformation in the organization to get to that voice of the customer. Oh, and I love that. We need to be more agile. Yeah, we hear that one. That one might be a top 5 for us. We need to be more agile. We need to be able to move more quickly. Well, I'll tell you what, if you are willing to settle for agreement and you're not pushing through to have conversations about how to align together, then you will always be saying we need to be more agile, because allowing your organization to stall out on agreement to what they want to do and not doing the work to figure out how you're going to do it together that gap means that organizations are not agile. It keeps them from being agile in that space. Anne Marie, I see this one. We need to offer a hybrid work environment. This is actually a really big conversation today. We're working with a lot of clients around the world around how do we return to work? What does a return to work policy look like? What would it look like to take all of the lessons of the last year and actually apply them and reinvent the workplace? We see a lot of organizations right now agreeing that it would be a shame to lose the lessons of the last year, but they're not doing necessarily the hard work of figuring out how do we work differently together in order to make that happen. Instead, they're focusing on things like facilities management and not thinking about the cultural impacts and the work process impacts. So what are the mindsets, the group dynamics, the organizational factors that you need to focus on to come into alignment with the idea that we should use the lessons of the last year to rethink the workplace and offer a hybrid work environment for our clients. Yeah, here's another one. We need more buy-in to our new language. Yeah, I think, Mary, that's a really good one too, right? What's the language that we're using around here and how do we represent it more completely? So these are some really good ones. I think, other ones that we hear, I mentioned the one before, and I think Kate captured it as well, which is we need to rethink our distribution model. That takes a lot of effort. Like that, people are going to be disappointed. Your customers are going to have to change. Your investors are going to have to understand what that process looks like. That's a big ask. It's a big strategic goal. And so many organizations in the last 10 years that I've worked with have put that out there as part of their strategy and made no gain on it because they're stuck in agreement. They all agree it needs to be done, but the work around it is really massive. Not just the tactical program level details, but how are we going to lead together to do that differently? Kate's just captured a couple of these up on the screen. And we need to connect the dots, put the customer first, be more agile, offer a hybrid work environment. Again, these are easy to agree to, right? Nobody's going to look at any of these and be like, no, I don't think we should do that. Not a good idea. But we want to try and figure out how to move these into the language of alignment. So let's just take a minute and let's just play around with one of them. Maybe we need to put the customer first. Let's think about that one. And I want to think about how could we reframe that we need to put the customer first as an alignment statement. What might it sound like as a leader if we were talking in terms of alignment instead of in terms of agreement? So let's just play around with that a little bit. And in the chat, think about, we need to put the customer first. And even if it wasn't yours that you put in there, how might a leader reframe that? How might they move to the language of alignment around that idea of we need to put the customer first? What are some ideas there? I'll give you just a minute to pop it into the chat. Kate's going to take some notes as we do it. So this is specifically, we need to put the customer first. Yeah, how can we make things work for the customer? Yeah, I think asking that question, Vandy, is a great first step. How can we make things work? And Bruce, I see you've got, what services do we need to offer to help our customers to be more responsive to their customers? Yeah, I think defining, so you might think about it in terms of, we're going to define the services that are required to help our customers serve their customers. That means you have to invest in research, right? You have to invest in knowing your customers in a different way. You're going to have to really think about where your limited resources are going in order to get that perspective pulled forward. Anne Marie, I see you've got, we need to design new products with the customer. Getting your customers involved in product innovation is a great idea. And again, that's one of those circular conversations that we've heard a lot over the years, where people say, well, we're going to get the voice of the customer, we're going to bring them into our product innovation sessions. But then you get resistance from the salespeople who don't want their customer relationships to be disrupted, or you get resistance from legal who has issues with bringing customers together because there's 101 reasons why, right? Why that can't be done. Again, you have to think about, how are we going to lead together in order to bring this strategy to life? How are we going to deliver on our most important priorities? Bruce, I see you've got, what are the missed opportunities that our customers are not seeing? If I were going to frame that in the language of alignment, I might think about how we're going to invest in research that helps us to understand our customers' technology challenges. I'm making that up, right? But these are just ways to start to think as leaders about, how can I personally move beyond just simply saying we need to have the voice of the customer, and start thinking about, what could I be measured on? How do I come down the ladder of abstraction? Less about asking questions and more about, what's the action that I could be taking? How do I lean into that space really effectively? Vandy, I think you've got this around as well, around customer needs, right? So how do we learn more about it? So again, we just wanted you to play around with this idea. We've just got a couple of minutes left. So I want to just think a little bit about, just in summary, what does it really look like to be in alignment versus in agreement? And so we're going to pop back up on the screen here and give Kate just a minute to catch up. But I think as we move forward, this idea of getting stuck in the language of alignment happens because when we move into alignment, it's more confronting. It's more specific about how we need to behave as individuals and as a leadership team. It requires cross-organizational effort. We have to trust that all of our colleagues are taking these steps in the right direction. It requires having hard conversations about what's going to change in the organization, what's going to change for our employees, for our customers, and for our investors. And by the way, if you're in an executive team position, what's going to change for you? Oftentimes, executive leaders feel like they're a little exempt, but I would say that you shouldn't attempt to change other people until you change yourself first. And that's a really important construct when it comes to coming into alignment. So alignment means changing your language. It might sound simple, but people don't do it. If it's so easy, more people would do it. Think about how you change your own language and challenge other people to change their language to move out of agreement and into alignment. Creating clarity on how to lead together. What are you going to do differently? What are the behaviors and the decisions and the priorities and the trade-offs that you're going to make differently in order to bring that to life? And then think about how you start with self to change your own decisions and behaviors as you move into doing it with other people. So hopefully these 30 minutes have gone by quickly for you. They've gone by quickly for us. Just a couple of things about thinking about whether you're in agreement or in alignment with your most important strategies. If there are things that you're talking about over and over and over again, you're probably stalled out in agreement. And we'd really encourage you to start to think about, how do you have the quality conversations that will put you into alignment with how to lead together? Think about that in terms of anything that you feel like we're just bandying about these expressions or these ideas. Everybody agrees with them, but we're not seeing action. You've got to have that push into the right conversations to create alignment across your leadership team and to deliver together. I want to say thank you very much for joining us. It's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the comments that have been popped into the chat. They've been really helpful. So thank you for participating. We're going to record this as well. So you'll see a recording of it posted on our website. We'll also send out a PDF with a a summary of the conversation that we've had. And you can always just say hello at karrikinsgroup.com if you want to get in touch. We'd love to talk with you about where you're stalled out in agreement and help you to have those quality conversations to get into alignment around your most ambitious strategies. We know that everybody has these great ambitions for growth, and we want to be a part of that. So reach out, say hello. We'd love to chat, and thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it. Bye-bye.